Hi everyone, I'm CaliKim. Welcome to my garden. I'm really glad you're here with me today. What I'm going to do today is share with you 25, 30, maybe even more garden tips. We're going to walk around the garden together, and these are all tips I wish I would have known when I first started gardening. Would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of effort. So by sharing these tips with you today, hopefully it will help you to be a better gardener and really enjoy your gardening journey that much more. And we're going to start up here on the Smart Pots deck. Now, if you're brand new to gardening and you have a small space, maybe you live in an apartment or a condo or a balcony, and you don't think you can garden because you don't have enough space, you absolutely can. I felt the same way when I first started gardening. We started off in a condo, and I didn't even know you could grow vegetables in containers. But I'm growing here in Smart Pots, fabric containers, and this is really not that big of a space. It might be a 7 by 8 foot space or so, and I'm growing about 15 varieties of fruits and vegetables and leafy greens and herbs in this small space. So definitely grow in containers. Now here we've got some basil, and it's really great to grow containers of basil for your kitchen. So I guess that would be my second tip, is grow herbs in containers. If you're going to start with anything, I highly encourage you to start with herbs. They're very easy to grow. They really don't require a lot of effort. They're so expensive at the grocery store. They usually go bad before you can even use them, but when you grow your own, not only do they grow fast, most of them are drought tolerant, but you can just step right outside your back door and literally just snip herbs to really pump up the flavor of your food. And wow, does it ever pump up the flavor of your food. So I highly recommend growing herbs in containers. Now with basil here, it's one of the easiest warm weather herbs to grow. Right now, if you already have basil growing in your garden, tip number 3 is make sure that you're propagating your basil simply by sticking it in a jar of water. That way you can bring it inside during the winter time. After it gets cold, your basil will die off. Then you'll have fresh basil all winter long. After it develops roots, which usually takes a week or so, then you can put it in a little cup of soil and grow it on your windowsill all winter long. So over in here, don't just stick to herbs, but also grow fruits like strawberries. Strawberries are a perennial, so they grow beautifully in containers. I have them here in a crate tower, which is basically just 3 crates stacked up. You can buy these plastic crates like at Target or Walmart. They're very inexpensive, but you do need to line them with something so all the soil doesn't fall out. So I have these lined with the Smart Pots crate liners. Super easy to do. Then you just cut holes in the side of your crates. And when you don't have a lot of space, this is really the way to go for strawberries. Right now the weather is cooling down in the mid 80s. It's perfect temperature for strawberries, and they are really popping out after the hot summer we've had. All kinds of flowers in here, lots of berries coming on, and a lot of berries on top. There's probably, I'm going to say about 30 plants here in maybe a 12 by 12 square foot space. So the next tip is when you're growing in a small space, definitely grow vertically. The crate tower is a great example of that, but also I've got tomato cages here stacked, just 2 cages stacked on top of each other for a taller tomato. Not to mention one of my favorite ways to grow vertically and very inexpensive is the ladder mesh trellis. You can get these at Home Depot or Lowe's, and then just loop them over or arch them over your garden beds. It's a little 3-foot little shorty here. It's a great way to grow a ton of veggies in a small space. So just in this little shorty, which is 3 foot long, and you can grab these over at CaliKimGardenandHome.com, I've got about 5 different veggies in here. I've got some greens here. Sorrel is a perennial green. Some onions along the edges, so I'm really utilizing every single space. Some cucumbers growing up over the trellis. I've even got a tomato in here, a dahlia, which we may get some late blooms from, and I think that's about it. So there's about 5 or 6 different kinds of veggies, so you can really pack it in, grow intensively, and grow a ton of veggies in a small space. Now the other thing I wanted to share with you too, the next tip, which I do every year here in Southern California, is plant some late season tomatoes that are cold tolerant. So this works very well for southern gardeners in frost-free climates. And I've got one of those in my tomato seed collection. Actually, Jerry, I think it's way back over in here. This is the Siberian tomato. So just by the name itself, you can tell that it's going to tolerate colder temperatures. So by using this succession planting strategy, when my summer tomatoes are just about dying out, I'm going to have a fresh new plant a winter tomato, which won't produce a ton during the winter time, but it will definitely give me some fresh tomatoes during the winter so I don't have to buy them at the grocery store. The next tip that I really wish I would have known when I first started gardening many years ago is to use shade cloth. Shade cloth has been a lifesaver for me these past few years. When I first started gardening, I didn't use it and a lot of my plants burned up in the summer heat. In fact, I remember in my early days of gardening, I was so excited to go out and harvest my strawberries. Had my little harvest basket already. I went outside. They were toast. They were completely crispy and dry and burned up. And we were in the middle of a heat wave, and I didn't know that I needed to put shade cloth over my plants. And that's how I learned about shade cloth. Then I discovered it, and what a game changer. So if you've never used it, basically what shade cloth is it's a porous type of fabric. It has holes in it so that when you drape it over your plants, once it gets over 90 degrees, it allows some of the sun to get through, but blocks out the damaging UV rays that can kill your plants in hot temperatures. So here in the Smart Pots garden, I constructed kind of a semi-permanent shade cloth structure, which worked great for me this summer. When the days were over 90, I simply rolled it down. And you don't have to get really fancy with this. These are just poles that I put in the corner of my Smart Pots to hold the shade cloth up, and then rolled it down over the plants when it gets hot. Once it dips down below 90 degrees, all I have to do is simply roll it up so the plants can get the full sun. Now we're starting to get in the 80s and 70s pretty consistently, so pretty soon this shade cloth will come down, we'll fold it up and pop it in my garden shed for the winter time. So I'm really looking forward to that, seeing the full view of the garden. One more little thing I want to share with you that we just filmed a video on last week is right now in the fall to plant garlic. Now, I didn't always know you're supposed to plant garlic in the fall, so go back and watch that video for all the details. So I know it doesn't look like much right now, but garlic actually goes dormant in the winter time. You plant it in the fall. For you northern gardeners, about 2 weeks before your first frost. Southern gardeners can plant November, December, October, and then harvest it in the summer. So it's really a no-brainer crop. You just grow it, kind of forget about it, and then you harvest beautiful garlic bulbs that are so flavorful and potent. Next tip is plant your vegetables and fruits close to your house, at least a portion of it. When I first started gardening in this backyard, I didn't have any plants up here. A lot were down in the main garden, and sometimes you just don't feel like walking down there. It's not that far. But the more you have close to your house, the more likely you are to pop outside and harvest for a quick dinner. So come on down here and let's take a look at the hill garden. Enjoy having you along in the garden today. Please make sure you subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Thanks. Another way to grow close to your house is by growing in hanging baskets. Now think beyond flowers for hanging baskets. You can grow small vegetables or herbs. In this one I'm growing strawberries, which is perfect for hanging basket. You can pop them close to your house right outside your back door and just pick some fruit or some lettuce for your lunchtime sandwich. Now the strawberries here, let me just show you these. They're a great fruit to grow because they're a perennial, and I'll talk more about winter care for strawberries in just a moment, but they send out runners about this time of the year, which are just these shoots coming out from the mother plant. And look, they're already developing roots on it, but these are actually growing down into my little garden bed down below here. And I'm just letting the runners run right now. They will actually establish themselves in the ground, and we'll have a lot of new free plants under here that will grow brand new strawberries next summer. Now, actually, there are some that are actually attaching here and have already rooted in the ground. And once that happens, you can just cut this. To cut it off from the mother plant, it'll grow a brand new free plant. So you can save a lot of money that way just by rooting plants that will propagate naturally. Now come on down here, so I want to show you my kitchen herb garden. Now when you're growing herbs, there are so many wonderful perennial herbs that you can grow. So watch my 20 perennials video for more info on that. But here we've got some perennials, which are chives, one of my favorite all-time herbs to grow. Definitely grow chives. You're gonna save so much money by growing your own chives. Chives can actually be divided. They grow in clumps. There's so many chives in here, I've gotta get in here and divide these. But you can just split apart the individual chives. You can put these in little pots. You can share them with friends, which is a great way to save money for your Christmas gifts. And then chives are one of the herbs I use the most. Just pop out, snip some, and throw them in your scrambled eggs and salads. They're just so versatile. So big money saver here in chives. But also perennial herbs Like rosemary. Rosemary can actually grow as a landscape plant too. Just cut it back a couple times a year. It's very, very hardy, winter hardy. So in a lot of zones, it will grow over the winter time, definitely in southern zones. And then sage is another one of my favorite perennial herbs. So grow yourself some of these perennials. You don't have to plant seeds every year or plant plants every year. They'll continue to grow and give you fresh herbs for years to come. You really can't go wrong with that. Next tip I wish I would have known when I was a new gardener is plant specifically for the pollinators. You definitely want to have a plan to bring pollinators into your garden. By doing this, you're going to have a lot more vegetables. So some of my favorite pollinator flowers are salvia, brings in the pollinators like crazy. The purple salvia specifically. And salvia is also a perennial. So in southern zones, it will grow year round. In northern zones, not too sure how winter hardy it is to which zone, but definitely if you cut it way back and mulch it heavily, even cover it in the wintertime, it'll pop back. In southern gardens, you just need to cut it back, really don't need to do anything. So definitely have a flower plan for the pollinators. Now the dahlias here are a perennial flower. Just did a video on that, on how to cut them back for the winter. Either leave the tubers in the ground in southern climates, or in northern climates, dig your tubers up, take them inside, and then bring them back outside in the winter. And believe me, if you plant some of these flowers here, the sunflowers, of course, are a huge pollinator attractor. You're going to be bringing the pollinators in droves to your garden, and you'll have a lot more vegetables too, plus you get to enjoy the beauty of the flowers. Another tip that you can do if you don't have a lot of flowers in your garden is just let some of your herbs and other plants go to seed and produce flowers, and it brings in the pollinators like crazy. You'd be surprised. For example, I have so much basil in my garden right now. I always let some of the basil bolt, which means it shoots this tall stalk up from the middle. And once it bolts, the flavor is really not the same anymore. It turns a little bit bitter. So I leave some of these on, and you can tell some of my basil is starting to flower. Now, bees absolutely love basil flowers. So no big deal if some of them flower. You won't get as much basil, but just plant plenty, and that way the bees have plenty and you have plenty. It's really a win-win situation. Next tip, and wow, I really wish I would have known this when I first started out, is succession planting. If you're not familiar with that term, it's just planting, staggering your planting throughout the growing season so you have a lot more to harvest. I would have been able to harvest so many more vegetables if I would have done this strategy as a new gardener. So here I've got some cucumbers. I first started planting cucumbers probably in April, but then I planted a new wave of cucumbers, I think July, maybe even in August. And wow, did that really save me, because we had tons of heat later in the summer. I harvested a lot off here in midsummer. And then now that it's October, we've got a lot of new cucumbers coming on that are from the plants I put in late in the summer, which is really, really nice to have those this time of the year. So a lot of gardeners think, okay, it's one and done, but no, keep on planting throughout the growing season. So a lot of crops that you can succession plant, like cucumbers for a fresh new crop. Little miniature tomatoes like Tiny Tim are also a great crop to succession plant. The ones that are the best are really crops that produce quickly, like these little tomatoes, like beans, like cucumbers, and that way you can get a fresh new round of harvests late in the season. Now you might be saying, okay, Kim, but now we're coming into winter time. What can I possibly succession plant right now? We definitely want to check out our video on what to plant in October, because I talked about even planting indoors. So you have greens, herbs, and small tomatoes to grow indoors during the winter time when it's too cold to grow outside. So that's a form of succession planting too. So definitely check out that video. Next tip is grow your tomatoes on a tomato string trellis. I really wish I would have started doing this years ago. It has saved me a ton of space. I fit about 4 tomatoes in this 3 to 4 foot space. They're growing vertically, kept them trimmed along the bottom, which helped them be relatively disease-free all summer, and I've harvested a ton of tomatoes off them this summer. So I wish I would have started it years ago. If you have a 3 by 4 foot space and enough height here, you can definitely grow on a tomato string trellis. I've got videos on how to build that, and the cool part about it is I used almost entirely repurposed materials to build this trellis. We had the posts sitting along the side of our fence, the T-posts we already had. I cut a tree branch from our trees along the back fence for the top support there. I think the only thing I had to buy was the string and the tomato clips, which basically clip the tomato to the string to give it support as it grows. So it's really a great way to grow a lot of tomatoes in a little bit of space, and I know you're gonna love it too. So let me know down below if you're gonna try it next year. So the tomatoes are kind of reaching the end of their life right now here in October, but I do still have one more Aunt Ruby's German green tomato that we'll be harvesting in the next couple of days. Next tip is grow yourself some passion fruit if you have the space. Passion fruit is a prolific vine that you can grow. Here we've got it growing on an arch. You definitely need a strong, sturdy trellis or a big fence with a cattle panel to grow it on. It grows like crazy. In fact, I have to trim this about once a week. You can see all the shoots that are coming off here. But let me tell you, it is one of the most productive types of fruit I have ever grown. The passion fruit grow out of these gorgeous flowers. I don't have any open flowers right now, but they're absolutely beautiful. And then the tiny little fruit will be on the bottom here. Actually, underneath those leaves will be a fruit that grows. And this plant, I can't even tell you, we probably had harvested hundreds of passion fruit off it this summer. What happens is when they get ripe, they just fall to the ground. There's some right here at the base of the plant. It's a beautiful purple passion fruit, and it is very tart, kind of seedy on the inside. You can eat the seeds, very similar to a pomegranate. So every couple of days, I just pick up these, take them in the house. Once they start to kind of wrinkle up like this one, that's actually a sign that they're a little bit sweeter and a little bit more ripe. And then a lot of times I just cut this open and eat it right out of the shell or put it on yogurt. It is just so incredibly delicious. And crazy enough, this plant was given to me as just a few inch cutting maybe 5 years ago from Nisha, our live stream moderator. And look what it's grown into. We absolutely love it. So if you have a friend that has a passion fruit vine, you can cut off a small little branch.
Want my knife?
Yes. All right, Jerry's always prepared with his knife. You can cut off a small little cutting from the vine, put it in water. It does take a little bit to root it, and then you'll have a brand new passion fruit vine. However, it does really grow best in southern climates. So you northern gardeners probably won't be able to grow this in your garden. It's near impossible to grow inside because it's so big. So this might be one for the southern gardeners to stick to. It grows year round, it doesn't die back, and it's just an absolutely beautiful and productive plant. Next tip is grow perennial fruit. One of my favorites is blackberries. If you've watched our channel for very long, you know how much I love my blackberries. And again, if you've watched our channel for very long, you know that we transplanted our blackberries a couple of times. But they're perennials. So they'll survive very well in cold northern climates, and then they'll come back year after year for giving, and will give you a ton of fruit. Now we didn't get quite as many this year because of the fact that we transplanted them a couple of times, but they're still actually doing quite well here in the fall. The weather has cooled down just a bit, and we may get a last little crop here before the winter sets in. They will go dormant in the cold temperatures. The foliage will change colors here in Southern California. In colder climates, the foliage will turn brown. Once they're dormant, in order to get more in the spring, you need to cut them back. So you will cut the canes that produced this year all the way back to the ground because they won't produce again next year. The new canes that didn't produce this year, like these here, this is a vegetative cane only. This will be the cane that will produce next year's crop. So for these canes, you cut them back to about 2 feet. I'll do this probably in November or December. Cut them back to about 2 feet, and then once the weather warms up again in the spring, you'll be surprised how much they'll start growing again. They'll grow very quickly, and you'll have a new crop of blackberries, even more next year, because you cut them back in the fall. You really can't go wrong with homegrown blackberries. Raspberries and blueberries are also great perennial berries to grow. So don't feel like you have to plant all these at once. From season to season, from year to year, just add a new variety each time, and before you know it, you're gonna have a food forest in your backyard. Let me share a little tip now about winter care for strawberries. If you protect them over the winter time, they'll come back next year. So you definitely want to be planning on that this year. So with strawberries, what you can do is once the foliage dies back after the weather gets a little bit colder, you want to cut the strawberries back to the crown. Now it might be a little bit hard to see in here, Jerry. So here we've got the crown growing under the mulch. You want to cut them back and then heavily mulch your strawberry plants, because if the crowns can survive the winter time, in the spring the plants will start to grow back in your raised bed here, and then you can grow the strawberries for many, many years. So just mulch them heavily with, I'd say, 3 to 4 inches, even in colder climates, of shredded straw or shredded leaves. And the next year the strawberries will grow back and you'll have even more strawberries next year. Now, strawberries do have the most production time between 3 and 4 years. So pretty much after then you will need to replace your strawberry plants or grow new plants from the runners like I showed you up at the top of the hill. Next tip is, don't try and be perfect. It's okay to have a messy garden. I wish I would have known this when I first started out. Here's a case in point. This garden bed is a total disaster right now. I didn't cover it in the heat, and it is just burned up, drying up, full of pests, full of disease, just past its prime. But you know what? I've just kind of let it go, because eventually I want to pull this out and put some cooler veggies in here. So it actually serves as a little reminder to me, as things don't have to be perfect. You don't always have to have the time to do everything. The most important thing is that you just get out in the garden and you're enjoying it. So the next tip I can share with you here is know when to pull a plant at the end of the season. Now you can tell these definitely need pulled, but sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. What I always look for is, number one, how does the plant look? So you can tell here there's tons of issues on this plant. We've got pests, we've got disease. It's really not producing many more cucumbers for me anymore. We've got dried up tomatoes here. I mean, this is about as bad as it gets. So it's definitely not producing. Definitely doesn't look good, and it's really time to pull it out. So in the next couple of weeks, this will all come out and we'll be planting cool weather vegetables. So just be okay with imperfection. Be okay with some plants not always looking that great. Next tip is plant in the sunniest spot in your garden, especially in the fall and the winter. Now, it took me a couple of years to figure this out when I was a new gardener and we moved into this house. I tried to plant our whole hill full of things in the winter, because we can grow all winter here in Southern California. We get no sun on the hill in the winter and nothing grew, and I was very disappointed. So just manage your expectations and keep an eye on your garden to see where you should plant in the fall and the winter. And you'll learn that from year to year. So this is the spot for me in the winter time that gets the most sun. Our garden is on the north side of our house. So in the winter, when the sun drops lower in the sky, the house shades the garden, and it really only gets about 3, maybe 4 hours if we're lucky in the wintertime. So this is on the southernmost side or the northernmost side of the house, and it gets the most sun in the wintertime. So once the peppers are done producing, I put fall greens in here, lettuces, kale, chard, some cool weather herbs, and this is pretty much where I harvest and have my garden grocery store in the wintertime. So by adjusting your planting strategy in the winter, you can grow yourself a lot more vegetables that way. Next tip is overwinter your peppers. Now, I didn't even have any idea on this when I first started gardening, and I pulled all my pepper plants out once they died as the weather got cold. But don't pull your pepper plants. I'll be doing a video on this in the next couple of weeks. What you can do is actually overwinter them or grow them over the winter, so you can start with plants in the spring instead of from seed or from transplants. So especially in your southern climates, you can actually leave them in the ground over the winter time. Once they're done producing, don't have a lot more peppers on them. Once the days start getting in the 50s, the nights in the 30s and 40s, what you can do is just cut your pepper plants back, way back at the main V's of the plants. So you want to go above probably the second leaf node, cut them off, harvest all your peppers first of all, prune your plant right about the second leaf node above the V, and it'll be like maybe a 6-inch plant or so. Heavily mulch it to protect the roots over the winter time. And then in the spring, when the temperatures warm up, you're going to get brand new leafy growth and brand new peppers. Now, for your northern gardeners who have hard freezes, what you want to do is to prune your plant back, remove the leaves, remove the fruit, and then dig your plant up and then put it in a container and cover it. Put some fresh new potting mix in there. Don't necessarily have to cover it, but bring it into your garage or place it in a sunny windowsill. But before you do that, you definitely need to wash off the potting soil, even spray it with some Monterey Takedown. to take off any of the fungus gnats, and then take it in the house, and then when the weather warms up in the spring, you can bring it outside and plant it in your garden. So when you have it in your house, you want to just give it enough moisture just to keep it alive. They're not going to grow and produce in the wintertime, but you're going to overwinter them to put them back out in your garden in the spring. And that way you'll be harvesting peppers quicker in the spring. Now let me just bring you over here and show you a jalapeno pepper, which I've actually overwintered now for 3 winters. It's crazy. I mean, this plant looked like little sticks last year. I wasn't even sure if it would come back, but it has given me so many jalapenos off it this summertime, with more even coming on now. So your favorite varieties that are super productive, it's a great idea to do it with them. You might not be able to do it with all your peppers, but definitely your favorite peppers, so you can grow the same peppers next year. All summer long, we had a 15-foot sunflower stalk here, and my next tip has to do with repurposing. Repurpose and reuse wherever you can. What we did a video on this not too long ago, is we just cut the sunflower down. It actually blew over in the wind. I trimmed off all the extra branches and then tied it to the stalk that was still in place here with some twine. And now we have a brand new trellis, completely free, completely repurposed, made out of something that I already had. So you can save yourself a lot of money if you just look around your garden and see how you can repurpose what you already have. And I forgot to show you over here the tree branch trellis that's completely free, that I made just from the trees that we cut down here at the back. So you can really utilize natural materials, so you don't have to spend so much money on garden supplies. You can keep more of your money in your own pocket. So this is what I call a ladder tree branch trellis. So all it is sturdy tree branches lashed together at the junction points with some heavy duty twine. It's in the shape of a ladder with nice sturdy supports that I stuck in my raised bed. Completely free trellis. Next, grow greens that will produce over a long period of time that are both cold tolerant and heat tolerant. And 2 of my favorites are chard and kale. Now I love chard because you can grow it. It has so many different varieties that you can grow, and it's such a gorgeous plant. This is a yellow chard, and we've harvested this all summer long. You can actually use the stalks like you would celery in stir fries. You can use the leaves for wraps and smoothies. And the great thing about chard is not only is it heat tolerant, but it's cold tolerant. So it lasts through the heat in the summer and also through the cold winters. It's one of the most heat tolerant greens. So even for you northern gardeners that experience heavy freezes, it'll probably last through a lot of your freezes in the wintertime, especially if you cover it. But the great thing about it is that you can cut it back if it gets bug infested or if it just starts to bolt. You can cut it back right at the base, leave a couple inches in there, and it'll grow back for you. So it's a continual crop that you can grow almost year round, especially in southern climates, sometimes even for a couple of years. Now let me bring you over here and I'll show you one of my other favorite greens to grow year round, and that is kale. Another one of my favorite greens to grow that's cold tolerant and heat tolerant and very high producing is kale. Not to mention, it is considered a power green. So here we've got a beautiful KX kale. This is in my specialty green seed collection, and I think it's also in my fall garden seed collection, but it's just a gorgeous kale plant, and this one also has been cut back many times. Super nutritious, super delicious, and you can actually grab my seed collections right now for 25% off over at CaliKimGardeningHome.com with the code CaliKim25. But a great green to grow for you southern gardeners all year round. Northern gardeners, again, can cut it back, cover it. It is super frost hardy. Next tip I had no idea when I first started gardening is mulch. Now I talk about mulch a lot, but if you've never heard me talk about mulch, I gotta put one more plug in for it. You really want to use mulch on all your garden beds, especially now in the fall. You can collect leaves from all the trees. And it's a great way, again, to repurpose and make good use of a free resource. Mulch has so many benefits to your garden bed. Once you empty your garden beds out, you can put some compost in and then put some mulch over your garden beds. It will break down over the winter time. The worms will come in like crazy. They love shredded leaves, and your garden beds will be that much more ahead of the game in the springtime. Be nice fertile soil and ready to grow. But besides that, the mulch really does help protect your plants. In the summer, It insulates the soil from the heat. In the wintertime, it insulates the soil and the roots of the plants from the cold. So here I just planted the squash, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's popping up really nicely. I'd really like to get some squash out of it. So what I'm going to do is put a nice layer of mulch around the bottom of the plant. So as the weather does get colder here in the next month or so, it will protect the roots of the plant from just completely dying and help extend that growing season just a little bit, and might even save my plant from the cold weather. So definitely mulch your garden beds, mulch your plants, whether in the winter or in the summer. You won't have near as much water evaporation. It will save you a ton of water, and you won't have to water as often. I'm going to tell you a little story about how well mulch works along with my next tip, and that is install drip irrigation from the get-go when you first start gardening. It will save you so much time and so much money. You can set up your whole garden on an automated watering system. And the more that your plants are watered, the more consistent they're watered, the more productive they'll be. It's a lot easier to set up a drip system at the beginning of your gardening journey rather than trying to install it at the end. So you can put it on a timer, and our garden is on 3 different zones here in the main garden. So you can get a timer that has 1 zone, 2 zones, or 3 zones. That way you can water different areas of your garden. So I've got videos on how to do that. Just go search our channel for drip irrigation. And then this timer here is actually for my container system. So you do want to have 2 different systems set up. One for your containers, because they have different watering needs than your raised beds and your in-ground garden. One for your in-ground garden and your raised beds. Now, a few weeks ago, we were trying to fix a drip out here, a leak, and we actually replaced the batteries in this timer. However, I made a really big mistake, and I didn't check the timer to make sure it was running properly after we installed new batteries. So what happened is our whole drip system was completely shut down for 2 weeks because the timer was not set properly. And we had a heat wave at the same time, so all my plants started wilting. I had no idea what was going on. I came over to check the drip, and I realized what I had done and reset everything. But my story about mulch is, because I consistently mulch my garden with about 2 to 3 inches, even this summer 4 inches of shredded straw and shredded leaves, my garden actually survived 2 weeks in 90 to 100 degree temperatures without water. So that's testament to how well mulching works to protect your garden from the heat in the summertime, and really helps keep the moisture in the ground where the plants need it instead of evaporating and everything completely drying out. Next tip, don't be afraid to experiment in the garden. As a new gardener, I wanted to get everything just right. I was afraid to make mistakes, but then I realized one of the best ways to learn is by experimenting, making mistakes, and learning from them. Now, the fig tree here was an experiment for me this year. What I'm doing with this one is called the espalier method. So brand new for me. We'll see how it works out. I put it in a new spot here. I don't think it's quite getting enough sun, so we may have to make some adjustments with that. But basically my experiment here is to espalier it, which means you're training the branches to grow horizontally to save yourself some space, and that way you can grow a large tree like a fig tree in a very small space. So here I've got 3 different levels. The bottom level here, and I've got a video on this if you want to check it out, is the branch growing along this way. We've got a second level, and no branches are quite long enough to be attached to the second level. And then the top level here, we actually top the tree, and they're training this top branch to go against this 3rd level of wire. So it's a super easy method, and it's a fun experiment that you might want to try too, to grow a big tree in a small space. Figs are perennial, so you can put that in the perennial fruit tip as well, and grow yourself some beautiful, delicious figs where you might not have the room for it otherwise. My last tip here to close out the video is don't forget to make a spot where you can just chill out and relax. This is our chill zone here, and often we sit out here in the middle of the day just to take a little break. It gets nice and shady, and we can look around, see the work that we've done, appreciate it, relax, and enjoy the time in the garden. So gardening is a lot of work sometimes, and you do need to make sure you take that time to slow down and enjoy it. So let me know what tip you like the best and what tip you're going to implement in your garden this week. Thanks for watching. See you next time in the garden.